population increased fourfold in the last century. So what do we expect on the next century? And what does population growth mean to our future? Will that be mass migration, overcrowded slums, diseases and population, chaos and dividend of energy? And the human species are only focused on sustaining themselves? Will population growth destroy our way of life, or is this prophecy just undergrounded panic?
Pila kabuk inyong anak?
5.
Pila mo kabuk ga puyo in aning balaya?
Kuan mi kapuyo diri. Tulo akong anak, tulo ang nanak ko nya. Akong banad bari kuan mi diri 5 ang kuan akong anak paman sa kong igagaw sa kong igsoon. Akong eskwela.
Anak, pila kabuk ang gaskwela?
Unsa edad sa inyong pinamanghuangan?
16.
Ang pinamanghuran,
4.
unsa pangalan sa imong bana?
Posilari bakon.
Trabaho niya?
Construction worker, kung wala kung mag-construction na siya, kung wala construction, ganang driver seat card.
Pila iyang sweldo kada buwan?
Hindi man magkapareha.
Sakto ba kini iyang sweldo nga ibuhi sa inyong pamilya?
Ito sa tini, pangpagitabang sa tunang sa kuwata pangtabang sa tinahan.
Unsa man ninyo para mabuhi inyong mga anak?
Budget. Budget ang pagpalit ng pangtong sudan, anak. Para itong isda, anak. Budget ng tanan, anak. Sa budget.
Kapila mo mukaon sa isa ka?
Patuloy.
Kung adunay usa sa inyong pamilya ang masakit, unsa imong buhaton?
Nanghuwa ko kwarta sa kaliwat. Napagpuang mga pagtabang sa gobyerno.
Isip usa ka housewife, unsa man imong mga gibuhat para makatabang ka sa imong pamilya or mga anak nimo?
Kuan, tabang ko sa ako igagaw namin sa karinderya sa tindahan. Para namin inikap sa tabang sa bata, abot-abot ba?
Para nimo, pabor ba ka nga ang pagdaghan sa atong populasyon maoy nag-unang problema dili sa atong nasod? This is the house of Mrs. Fordelis Baton.
Okay.
Kay,
Okay. Ay, anak ko pre, may pinabuhi ba?
Unsa pangalan niyo, ma'am?
Junilin Adisas,
Pila kabuk inyong anak?
5.
Pila mo kabuk nga puyo aning balaya? Sa tanan ninyong anak, pila kabuk ang nagstila?
1. Bismillah sa lalim.
Okay.
unsa edad sa inyong pinamanghuangan?
1.
Ang pinamanghuran,
1. Size.
unsa pangalan sa imong bana?
Andre Dilila.
Unsa trabaho niya?
Driver seated.
Pila iyang sweldo kada buwan?
din.
Sakto ba kini ang sweldo nga ibuhot sa inyong pamilya?
Igo-igoon lang kung pila income.
Kapila mo mukaon sa isa ka adlaw.
Katulo.
Kung adunay isa sa inyong pamilya ang masakit, unsa imong buhaton?
Paningkamutan nga mapatambalan.
Isip usa ka housewife, unsa man imong mga gibuhat para makatabang ka sa imong mga anak o pamilya?
Maabag sa kumbana, mga labada, mga kuan, bantay bata. Trabaho sa para igyo sa dangin ka, makakaroon ng mga anak.
Para nimo pabor ba ka nga ang pagdaghan sa atong populasyon maoy nag-unang problema diri sa atong nasod? Ano man?
Tungod sa kamahal sa palitunon. Kung nakikita ng tao, maningkamot. Kaya mahal na kayong bugas.
Para nimo unsa kay solusyon para makontrol nato ang pagdaghan sa atong populasyon?
Punta nga, wala na yung mga kurap. Nga, ang itabang sa pobre, hatag na sa pobre.
We're now here in the house of Mrs. Jojo Bitla.
Yan, dili kita duha-drive. Ras mo kay ako. Duha-drive again. Sikoy ako. Amen. Ngit mo din. Ako pa.
In the 1960s, population growth reached an unprecedented rate, which led to apocalyptic prophecies. The poor would procreate endlessly and overrun the developed world. The legend of overpopulation was born. But it turns out high birth rates and the population explosion are not permanent features of some cultures or countries, but rather part of a four-step process the whole world is going through: the demographic transition. Most developed countries have already made the transition, while other countries are doing it right now. Let's go back to the 18th century, when the entire world, including Europe, was in the first stage of the demographic transition. By today's standards, Europe was worse off than a developing region, suffering from poor sanitation, poor diets, and poor medicine. A lot of people were born, but lots of them died just as fast, so the population hardly grew. Women had between 4 and 6 children, but only 2 of them would reach adulthood. Then the Industrial Revolution happened in the UK and brought the greatest change in human living conditions since the Agricultural Revolution. People went from being peasants to workers. Manufactured goods were mass-produced and became widely available. The sciences flourished and advanced transportation, communication, and medicine. The role of women in society shifted and created the conditions for their emancipation. Slowly, this economic progress not only formed a middle class, but also raised standards of living and healthcare for the poor working population. The second transition stage started. Better food supplies, hygiene, and medicine meant people stopped dying all the time, especially so at a very young age. The result was a population explosion, doubling the UK's population between 1750 and 1850. The main reason families used to have lots of children was that only a few of them were likely to survive. Now that had changed, so the third stage of the transition was set in motion, fewer babies were conceived, and population growth slowed down. Eventually, a balance emerged. Fewer people were dying and fewer children were born, so the death rate and birth rate became stable. Britain had reached the fourth stage of the demographic transition. This didn't only happen in the UK, more and more countries went through the 4 stages. First, many births and many deaths due to bad living conditions. Second, better living conditions leading to fewer deaths and a population explosion. Third, fewer deaths resulting in fewer births and population growth came to an end. But if birth rates have dropped so much, why is the population still growing so fast? Well, the children born in the population explosion of the 70s and 80s are having kids themselves now, leading to a noticeable spike in overall population. But they are having far fewer children on average than their parents. The average today is 2.5, it was 5 40 years ago. So as this generation gets older and fertility declines further, the rate of population growth will keep on slowing. This is true for every country. In the West, we tend to overlook progress in other regions of the world. But actually, most of the world's countries have made it to the fourth stage. Just look at Bangladesh. In 1971, the average woman had 7 kids, but 25% of them would die before the age of 5. In 2015, the mortality rate was down to 3.8%, and women had only 2.2 kids on average. This is the rule, not an exception. We're not special, we just had a head start. It took developed countries about 80 years to reduce fertility from more than 6 children to less than 3. Others are catching up fast. Malaysia and South Africa did it in only 34 years. Bangladesh took just 20. Iran managed it in 10 years. All these countries that are catching up didn't have to start from scratch, and the more support they get, the faster they catch up. This is why programs that help lower child mortality or help poor nations develop are so important. No matter what your motivation is, whether you dream of a world where all people live in freedom and wealth, or you just want fewer refugees coming to your country, the simple truth is that it's beneficial to you personally if people on the other side of the globe can live a good life. And we are getting there. The percentage of people living in extreme poverty has never been as low as today. So the future of global population growth is actually not an apocalyptic prophecy at all. It's a promise. Population growth will come to an end. The UN forecasts that the 12th billionth human will never be born at all. And as the development level of the world rises, the number of people with a higher education will increase tenfold. Countries who used to be in need will help advance development instead. More people is going to mean more people able to advance our species.